our sister organization, the Centers for Spiritual Living, call their prayers treatments. And they have a saying, treat and move your feet. Okay? So here at Unity Santa Fe, we say pray and surrender until you're guided to move your feet. Okay? So, as I said, this is the second in a series of 5 messages on this book, Hell in the Hallway. And the human condition that today's message, Surrender, focuses on is that, you know, this is just how things should be. You know, that's the human condition. We think things should be a certain way. And so when they're not a certain way, we say, you know, this isn't right. This is not how things should be, right? We begin to should on ourselves, right? That it shouldn't be this way or it should be another way. And thinking this is what hurts most in these hallways. That thought that things should not be this way is what causes us the most anguish, the most frustration. So the spiritual solution is to accept what is, and that's what we spent last week talking about, to accept what is and then surrender. Now, we don't surrender to what is, you know, whatever the situation is. We surrender the situation to our divine nature, or if you're more comfortable, to God, to our Christ self, our higher power, whatever word you want to give it. So we surrender it. In other words, we don't tell God about our big problem. We tell our big problem, or we tell our problem about our big God. Okay? That's what we're wanting to do, and that's what we mean by surrender. It's not about giving up. You know, I remember a story about, a little stereotypic here, but a woman is at a yield sign, and she's there for a really long time. And I'm sure it was a guy in the car behind her who really got impatient. And he's blowing his horn and whatever, and he finally gets out of the car and he goes up to her window and he said, "Look, lady, the sign says yield, not give up." Okay? So when we're talking about surrender, please don't think of it as giving up. It is far from giving up. So, what's in it for you? What do you think might be in it for you to be able to, in a situation, to surrender it to your higher self? Peace. Peace, absolutely. That's the one I've got down. Peace, it's peace of mind to be able to surrender it. And also serenity. Yeah, peace and serenity. I'm not quite sure how they may be defined differently. So the first point I want to make goes back to what we call in 12-step rooms, stinking thinking. No G on the end of it. Stinking thinking. Okay? And as I said in terms of the human condition, thinking things should be different than they are is what causes us all the pain, all the anguish we have about a situation. So these thoughts, our own thoughts about a situation, are our worst enemies if they are negative and limiting. Because we believe in unity that we create our life by our thoughts. You know, we often sing our thoughts are prayers, and they are. So we've got to be aware of what we're thinking. And when we've got stinking thinking, we need to remember that we are responsible for our second thought and our first action. Okay? That first thought is usually stinking thinking. But the second thought, we can reframe it. And we can focus on, if you remember the series I just did on the power of the empowerment dynamic, the power of TED, that we talked about, you know, focusing. As a victim, we focus on what's wrong for me, woe is me. We switch to being a creator, and we think about what we want instead of what we don't want. And it may be just to get through this, You know, at that moment, see ourselves going through it, centered in peace, wisdom, and love. Because we teach in Unity that our thoughts are like magnets, and that they attract people, ideas, and situations into our lives. And I believe that that's not about metaphysical abuse of beating ourselves up, you know, what was I thinking and all of that, but just to realize that that's what happens, and maybe that's what's trying to get our attention. That, gee, maybe I shouldn't have been focusing on that so much. So that no matter what happens in our life, our experience is based on our thoughts about it. A Course in Miracles says, I've given this all the meaning it has for me. The meaning that we give what's happening that's our thoughts. We create meaning through our thoughts. And we can either be miserable or we can be at peace. The second point is to realize that these hallways that we go through, these situations that we would prefer not to go through, are for us and not against us. Because the moment I think that this situation is against me, I'm in what? What kind of hood am I in? Victimhood. So we don't want to go there. We want to stay out of that neighborhood. It is not a safe neighborhood, okay, that victimhood place. So the work of the hallway, Ellen Debenport says, is to shift our thinking from victim to volunteer. From what, why did this happen to me, to why did this happen for me? Wow, what a different question, right? Why did this happen for me? And I've come to believe that whatever happens to me is for me, and it is calling me to be all I can be. You know, it's saying, okay, here's the situation. What am I gonna have to call forth in myself to get through this situation? How can I make it bless me? And a lot of times these hallways, these situations, may be what my soul wants me to work on, but it's not what my ego wants to work on, you know? And I'd rather have what's in hallway number 2 instead, or whatever it may be. But to just realize that we can take any situation that's happening us, and we can ask that question, how is this for me? How can I make it bless me? I often tell the story of Jacob at Jabbok Fort when he wrestled with the angel till daybreak, and I think I told it last week, but I love it. I say, you know, and the angel said, let go of me, for the dawn is breaking, and he said, I won't let go of you until you bless me. I won't let go of you until you bless me. And I love having that attitude. So I want to tell you a story that kind of leads into the third point of surrender. And the story is that I didn't know how. You know, when I became the minister here in Santa Fe 24.5 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. I was a licensed Unity teacher. I was willing. That was about it. And so I finally, you know, got down on my knees, which I don't often pray in that position, but I did. And I remember just saying, God, I have no idea how to grow this church, how to sustain this church. I don't know what I'm doing. So if you want this church to succeed, you're going to have to send me the people and the resources to make it happen. And look at all of you. You're here, okay? The people that have sat in these seats before you, the people that will sit in the seats after you, that they came forth. And one really delightful story is for those of you who know Carolyn Doherty. She was here, she came about 6 months after I stepped in from the pews to the pulpit. And she had been in a big church in Washington, D.C. And I don't know, 6 months or so after she got here, she was back in Washington, and someone said to her, well, how's the Unity in Santa Fe? Or they said, Santa Fe. And, and she said, well, you know, it's a lot smaller than this church, and they don't have as many activities or speakers and, you know, things going on. And this person said, well, maybe you're there to build that church. Well, if you were here a few weeks ago, you know that Carolyn Doherty was our de facto general contractor when we bought this building and transformed it into, from a Middle Eastern grocery store delicatessen to a sacred sanctuary. So I think that, you know, I had to surrender because I knew I couldn't do it. So I had to surrender this whole community to that aspect of me that's the same as that aspect of you that knows how to do this stuff. So that's that third point of surrendering. So we got to get rid of the stinking thinking. We got to realize the situation is for us, not against us, and then we have to surrender. This guy that she tells a story about in the book, his name is Sam, and he said, surrender, I believe today, is one of the most powerful and useful spiritual tools that, when practiced, can lead to a powerful and serene life. So we have to realize that this acceptance and this surrender does not change the situation, okay? It changes us. And it shifts our consciousness from suffering, wailing, and gnashing our teeth to peace of mind and serenity. And it's giving up the notion that life should be fair or make sense in any given moment. So, while Ellen says it's valid to have preferences, but we really don't know how things should be, so we surrender. And that's really the first 3 steps of the 12-step program, is that we recognize, we accept that we are powerless over a given situation and that our life has become unmanageable. And some people argue with that, but it's like, hey, you're obsessing about it, you're spending all your energy on it. I call that, your life has become unmanageable. The second step is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves, our divine nature, could restore us to sanity. And the third step is we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of our divine nature. To me, that's real surrender. When I'm willing to say, here it is. I haven't got a clue what to do. Here it is. And some people surrender when they hit bottom. And there's a wonderful story that time prevents me from sharing with you in the book, where the person literally hit bottom and was on her knees screaming in her garage, and she surrendered. And she felt surprising gratitude in the midst of the circumstance, and she recognized her soul's purpose. And Ellen Debenport says, alone on the floor, without the approval of society or support from anyone, Rachel opened herself to a spiritual awakening. And that's what we're about here at Unity Santa Fe. This isn't about me informing you about spiritual principles. This is about me sharing with you spiritual principles that can transform your life if you're willing to work them. So, I'd like you to make an affirmation with me that you can include in your prayer and meditation, which is always our how-to, right? That seeking prayer and meditation to experience peace in the moment. And here's an affirmation, if you repeat after me. I accept what is.
I accept what is.
I surrender what is.
I surrender what is.
To my divine nature.
To my divine nature.
I am open and receptive.
I am open and receptive.
To the gifts of this situation.
To the gifts of this situation.
And let's just take that into the silence for a few minutes. And I'll repeat it. I accept what is. I surrender what is to my divine nature. I am open and receptive to the gifts of this situation. I accept what is. I surrender what is to my divine nature. I am open and receptive to the gifts of this situation. In the silence. And as we gently bring our attention back to this time and place, I celebrate that we accept what is, that we surrender what is to our divine nature, and that we are open and receptive to the gifts of the situation. And I invite you to silently say, thank you, divine nature, that I am. Thank you, thank you, thank you, that it is so and so it is. Amen.